Before we get into today's video, please quickly check to see if you're subscribed. It's totally free and allows you to never miss one of our stories. In the quiet space of the Terran Medical Facility, 3 distinguished guests awaited the beginning of a biological seminar, unlike any they had attended before. The lights were low and soft, casting a calming effect on the space designed with comforting hues and rounded edges, a subtle Terran touch to ease tension. Dr. Lena Park observed her guests with a warm smile as they settled in. She had prepared carefully for this session. In front of her sat a small, hand-selected group of alien delegates from 3 allied worlds, a reminder of the peace that now linked their species. Only recently had these worlds been unified through cooperation, an alliance hard won in the wake of the Virexian conflict. On her left sat Elder Zarnak of the Saranai, his feathered crest raised slightly, a telltale sign of interest. His keen eyes, much like those of a bird of prey, scanned the room with a practiced awareness. His presence was imposing but dignified, each movement deliberate. As a representative of his people, Zarnak often embodied the Saranai's respect for life in all forms, a fitting participant for today's topic. To his right sat Scholar Ziskel of the Virexian hegemony. His exoskeleton reflected faint, iridescent colors, a sheen catching the lowlights. Despite the mutual respect built through recent alliances, the Virexian approach to learning remained somewhat reserved, a characteristic she had grown familiar with. Lastly, seated with an expression of clinical detachment, was Observer 3024 from the Gray Enclave. Slim and small in stature, 3024's large, dark eyes captured every detail with unflinching curiosity. The Gray's dedication to scientific observation made them some of the most thorough researchers in the galaxy, and Dr. Park had no doubt that 3024 would bring that same intensity here. After a pause to ensure all eyes were on her, Dr. Park took a small step forward, addressing the assembly. Welcome, honored guests. Today we will explore a vital aspect of human life: birth. This is a process that connects us deeply with life itself, and while it is routine in our world, I believe you may find it surprising. Elder Zarnak tilted his head in acknowledgement, while Ziskel maintained a vigilant posture. Observer 3024 watched her intently, blinking once, his face betraying no emotion. Dr. Park gestured toward the observation window, giving her guests a view of the bustling maternity ward below. Rows of rooms lined the corridor, each prepared to welcome new life into the world. Medical personnel moved with quiet precision, tending to expectant mothers, checking equipment, and ensuring everything was ready. Today we'll be touring the maternity ward, she explained. This ward is where mothers come to deliver, and each room holds tools, staff, and support needed for the birthing process. If we're fortunate, we'll even witness a live birth, the miracle of life. She paused, letting her words settle. It's an experience that, I hope, will give you a glimpse into what makes human life so precious to us. As the seminar progressed, Dr. Park gestured toward her guests, inviting them to share their own methods of reproduction. This was as much a moment of cultural exchange as it was of scientific inquiry, and each representative seemed eager to convey the significance of their species' practices. Elder Zarnak, ever dignified, leaned forward first, his crest shifted to a subtle blue.
Among the Saranai, life is sacred,
he began, his voice carrying a deep, resonant tone.
We choose our nesting grounds with great care. When a new cycle begins, our mates select locations that have been sanctified by the elders. These are places of deep spiritual importance, often under the shade of the Valoran trees, which are ancient and imbued with the memories of our ancestors. each nest is lined with gathered foliage and branches of the sacred trees, and it is in these sanctuaries that we lay our eggs. Only when our homeworld moon Laura is high do our children hatch. It is said that Laura's light carries our ancestors' blessings, ensuring strength and wisdom in the new generation.
The reverent tone and weight of Zarnak's words lingered in the room, casting a reflective silence over the others. Dr. Park wondered how he might perceive the sterile environment of a delivery room, as well as the one-on-one nature of Terran birth. Scholar Ziskel began next. He shifted slightly, his exoskeleton catching the light. His multifaceted eyes flashed with a bright gleam as he cleared his throat, signaling his readiness to speak.
"For the Phyrexians,"
he said in a soft, accented voice.
"Our structure is paramount. There are no singular births, no small gatherings."
He paused, as if searching for the right analogy.
"Our queens, each a mother of thousands, are cared for by a designated group, the drones, who provide genetic material that is necessary for her to produce the next generation. She lays hundreds, sometimes thousands of eggs at once, each cared for meticulously by the worker caste."
He clasped his lower set of arms, his upper ones gesturing as he explained further.
"Our young emerge as larvae, entirely dependent on the workers for nourishment and protection. In our society, the concept of family is vast. Every individual is kin. We work not for personal gain, but the survival of the hive. This communal purpose is ingrained in us from the moment we emerge."
As he finished, he cast a thoughtful glance at the observation window, where a human mother below lay in the maternity bed, attended by only a few close caregivers. A flicker of something crossed his eyes. Perhaps intrigue or doubt. The scale of individuality of Terran birth seemed almost foreign to the Phyrexian mindset, where life was valued collectively. Dr. Park turned her gaze to observer 3024, whose large black eyes reflected the lights above with an otherworldly sheen. He blinked slowly before beginning telepathically, his tone as clinical as his expression. "Among the gray," he began, "we have long since abandoned traditional reproduction. Biological variation have been minimized through our use of cloning facilities, where we birth successive generations with precision. Genetic selection also ensures that only optimal traits persist, minimizing unpredictability." He tilted his head slightly. "While we once reproduced as you do, we left those methods behind eons ago, considering them both primitive and wasteful. Cloning allows us a measure of control unattainable in any other way. It is efficient, reliable, and logical." Dr. Park nodded, noting the contrasting perspectives. Each race approached birth in a way that reflected its core values: spirituality and legacy for the Saranai, communal strength and survival for the Phyrexians, and logical perfection for the Greys. She glanced toward the window, where the Terran mother's monitor displayed steady rhythmic vitals. Compared to the processes she had just heard, the concept of live birth might be overwhelming for the party. "I must warn you," she began. "As humans, we have our own unique approach to life," she said. "For us, birth is an intensely personal experience. It's often a deeply emotional and sometimes, yes, unpredictable. Typically, a single child is brought into the world, and that connection, well, it's difficult to quantify, but it binds us in ways that go beyond biology." Elder Zarnak's feathers shifted in a display of intrigue.
"How,"
he asked,
"do you ensure that such a vulnerable youngling survives?"
Dr. Park smiled. Through support from those close to us, parents, caregivers, communities. They help nurture each new life. Human birth is one of vulnerability, yes, but also one of immense resilience. Observer 3024 blinked slowly, the faintest crease forming between his large eyes as he processed this. And you choose to let the genetic variances remain? He asked, the tone almost skeptical. We do, Dr. Park replied. Because for us, those differences bring strength, adaptability, and individuality. Each child is unique, and while that comes with risk, it's also something we cherish. Ziskel tapped his exoskeleton thoughtful.
This strength in individuality,
He murmured.
It seems intriguing, but leaves open for weakness.
Maybe, Dr. Park said. But for us, it's worth it. The aliens glanced at each other, each processing her words. It was clear that the Terran concept of live birth, this one-at-a-time process, fraught with both beauty and vulnerability, posed a mystery. As they looked toward the mothers resting throughout the maternity ward, it was evident that the human process, so unstructured by their standards, had sparked their curiosity. Dr. Park gathered the attention of her guests as the holographic display flickered to life again, this time showing the human reproductive system in simple anatomical detail. Let's begin with the initial step in human reproduction, she began, her tone factual and calm. This process starts with a physical interaction between two humans, a male and a female, in an act called intercourse. She glanced briefly at her guests to gauge their understanding, then continued. In humans, reproduction requires the participation of both a male and female, whose reproductive systems are designed to complement each other. During intercourse, the male inserts a reproductive organ, known as the penis, into the female's reproductive organ called the vagina. This act, which can be a highly stimulating experience for the pair, also serves a biological purpose. It allows for the transfer of the male's reproductive cells, known as sperm, into the female's body. The display highlighted the path of the sperm as she spoke, showing its journey from the male to the female's reproductive tract. Upon completion of the act, she explained, the male releases a fluid called semen, which contains millions of these sperm cells. The sperm then travel up the female's reproductive system, seeking to reach an ovum, or egg, within the female's body. Only one sperm is needed to meet and fuse with the egg in a process called fertilization, which initiates the development of new life. The single fertilized cell is known as a zygote, and it contains a complete set of genetic information from both the male and female parents.
Fascinating. But I must ask, what happens to the male after this act? Does he perish as a result?
Dr. Park blinked, caught off guard by the question. Perish? Oh, no, nothing that dramatic. Ziskel tilted his head, clearly puzzled.
Then, what does he do? How does he indicate his role is complete?
Dr. Park hesitated for just a moment before a sly smile crept across her face. Well, typically the male takes a nap. Ziskel's mandibles twitched sharply.
A nap? That is the signal he has finished his reproductive duty? Your males sleep?
Yes, Dr. Park said, her tone playful. It's their way of saying, that's it, I'm done. Very efficient, wouldn't you agree? Ziskel froze, his antennae quivering as if searching for an appropriate response.
I'm not sure that's how I would describe it,
he finally declared, his voice tinged with disbelief.
How does that contribute to the process?
Well, Dr. Park replied, suppressing a chuckle. It doesn't, but it's harmless, and it gives the female a bit of peace, which, trust me, is often appreciated. Elder Zarnak's feathers rippled in what was unmistakably amusement, his voice a low rumbling hum.
It appears your males prefer to conserve energy post-task.
The observer 3024 blinked slowly, his head tilting as though considering this curious behavior. This nap, it is their final signal of contribution. Sure, Dr. Park said, nodding with mock seriousness. Think of it as a universal male declaration. I'm done. Ziskel made a noise that might have been a chitter or a suppressed laugh, muttering under his breath.
Terrans truly are an anomaly.
Dr. Park grinned and gestured toward the next section of her holographic display, while Elder Zarnak continued to chuckle softly, his feathers shifting in what could only be satisfaction at the absurdity of it all. The holographic display now transitioned to show the developing zygote, its cells dividing rapidly as it grew. Dr. Park continued. From this fertilized egg, a complex process of growth unfolds. Each new cell contains the genetic blueprint that dictates the future human's traits, hair color, height, even potential talents. The combined genetic information from both parents allows for an incredible diversity within the species. Observer 3024 leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes reflecting the image of the dividing cells. This process induces genetic variety in a way cloning does not replicate, he observed, his tone thoughtful. Each birth carries the potential for genetic combinations previously unseen within your species. Yes, precisely, Dr. Park affirmed. Humans embrace the uncertainty that comes with this natural genetic mixing. Each child is unique, shaped by the combination of traits inherited from their parents, which contributes to the adaptability of our species. The variability we encounter through natural reproduction enables us to respond to new environmental challenges with each generation. Scholar Ziskel, watching the display with keen interest, clicked his mandibles softly, a habit Dr. Park was beginning to recognize as his version of thoughtfulness. The concept of dedicating resources to nurture one offspring at a time appeared to be a novel one to him.
This method,
he began slowly.
It seems complex, yet I sense that for your people, the outcome justifies the effort.
Yes, Dr. Park replied. Human reproduction might seem resource-intensive from a different perspective, but to us, each child represents a valuable, unique individual. The time, energy, and resources we invest aren't seen as burdens, but rather as essential elements of the process. She observed her guests' reactions as the display moved on to show an embryo developing into a fetus. The nearly microscopic cells began to form recognizable structures, limbs, a tiny heart, and a face, signifying the emergence of a new human. Elder Zarnak tilted his head, his feathers lifting slightly.
Your dedication to nurturing life internally is admirable. We, Sar and I, may protect our eggs within nests, but this constant, intimate connection with your offspring throughout development, it speaks to the bond your kind values.
Dr. Park inclined her head, appreciating his words. Yes, humans often find deep significance in that bond. It's a close connection that ties the parents to their child, and many consider it a profound experience. The display advanced further, now showing the fetus in its final months of development within the mother's womb. Dr. Park glanced at her guests, noting their varied reactions to the sight of the nearly full-grown child, its limbs and features almost complete. During the course of pregnancy, she explained, there are many medical practices designed to support the mother, father, and developing child. Pregnancy can be challenging and sometimes risky, so medical care, proper diet, and rest are essential. Each family undergoes regular health checkups to ensure the mother's well-being as well as that of her child. Ziskel's antennae twitched with what seemed to be a mixture of awe and puzzlement.
Such an intensive process for a single life. Yet I cannot deny the strength of purpose I see in it. You humans persist even through the risks.
Observer 3024's large eyes remained fixed on the display as he absorbed every detail. This concept of maintaining genetic diversity through individual births introduces a resilience I find intriguing, he remarked. Cloning allows for complete predictability, yet it appears you derive adaptability from this approach. Dr. Park nodded. Human birth, in all its unpredictability, is a journey we cherish. The genetic uniqueness of each child offers adaptability and, perhaps more importantly, hope for future generations. As the holographic display faded, her guests looked between each other, with expressions that conveyed a newfound understanding. Dr. Park observed the transformation in their perspectives with quiet satisfaction, sensing that this exchange had opened a window not only into Terran life, but into the shared reverence for life itself, uniting them across their many differences. Dr. Park led her guests down a quiet hallway adjacent to the maternity ward, explaining the concept of prenatal care as they moved. A series of windows showed various couples going through different prenatal exercises, parent-child bonding, and even childbirth classes, giving her guests a glimpse into the efforts humans make to prepare for a new life. In human culture, the months leading up to the child's birth are filled with both physical and emotional preparations. Dr. Park began. Regular checkups allow us to monitor the baby's health and address any issues that may arise. This period isn't only about medical support, though. It's also a time of learning and connecting. Many parents attend classes to prepare for childbirth, where they learn what to expect during labor and how to care for their child afterward. Elder Zarnak, who had been observing through one of the windows intently, tilted his head. These classes, they are conducted for all potential parents? Yes, typically, Dr. Park replied, smiling. The classes teach parents about newborn care and offer guidance on how to bond with their child. For many, this shared experience of preparing for their child's arrival is deeply meaningful. Fathers, mothers, and family members often play a role in creating a supportive environment for the new life. Observer 3024's large eyes blinked slowly as he watched a video showing a couple in a childbirth class, their hands resting on the woman's abdomen, smiling in anticipation. His expression was reflective, but revealed a hint of curiosity. The need to prepare. This is a learned behavior for your species? Partly, yes, Dr. Park responded. There's an instinctual bond between parents and child, but a significant part of it is cultivated. Humans value the emotional connection that begins even before the child is born. These moments build trust and closeness, which carry through the child's life. Ziskel, watching through another window of a prenatal exercise class, clicked his mandibles in thought.
This dedication requires both male and female parents, then?
Often, yes, Dr. Park replied. While not every family is the same, many parents see pregnancy as a shared experience. These are exercises specifically designed to support the mother, like breathing practices and gentle stretching, which the father often participates in as well. She gestured to a video showing expectant parents practicing breathing techniques in a classroom setting. These exercises help prepare the mother physically for labor and build a sense of unity between partners. It's about preparing not only the body, but the mind and heart for what's to come. Zarnak's feathers flared slightly, showing a sign of interest.
For us, such preparations are taken collectively, he said thoughtfully. When the younglings are expected, it is not the parents but the entire clan that prepares for their arrival. Often it is an elder, a leader among our people, who takes the role of the primary caregiver.
Dr. Park raised her eyebrows, intrigued. So the care of the young are not necessarily the responsibility of the biological parent?
Correct,
Zarnak replied.
we see this as an honor. The youngling is considered a gift to the community, and their elder caring for them imparts wisdom from the earliest days of their life. It ensures that they receive knowledge and traditions, even if their biological parents are called to other duties.
Observer 3024's gaze lingered on the screen, where a human father was speaking softly to his unborn child, resting his hand on the mother's belly. The gray tilted his head slightly, his voice flat yet contemplative. This emotional preparation and bonding, it is unique to your kind. Dr. Park gave a small nod. Many mammals bond with their young, but for humans, the bond with the child begins long before birth, and it's deeply valued. We believe these early experiences can help shape the child's development. Observer 3024 blinked once, reflecting. For us Greys, we do not experience this process. Each Grey is released fully mature from the cloning tubes, equipped with a foundational set of knowledge and skills. Bonding, as you described it, would be irrelevant for us. We are fully capable upon release and expected to fulfill our roles without additional learning. Ziskel nodded in agreement, adding his perspective.
We raise our young communally as well. Each child is cared for by the hive, and the queen entrusts her offspring to our workers. We nurture them collectively, fostering the unity and cooperation that sustain the hive. This concept of individual bonding, particularly before birth, is unfamiliar to us.
Dr. Park absorbed these insights. That makes sense given your communal structures. For humans, the individual bond is significant. It's part of what makes each family unique. She led them to a room filled with training models and birthing equipment, where expecting parents practice handling newborn dolls to familiarize themselves with newborn care. The aliens watched as a couple cradled a practice doll, gently rocking it as they mimicked comforting motions. Ziskel observed them closely.
Such care! Your kind dedicates intensive time even before the child arrives.
Yes, Dr. Park said, smiling. The months before birth are often spent envisioning what the child will be like, planning for their future and imagining the relationships they will share. In a way, the child is already part of the family before they even arrive. Zarnak's feathers shifted in a display of respect.
In Saranai society, the young are respected as individuals, but they are also taught to serve the clan. Their identity is shared with their community.
Dr. Park nodded. We also value the role of community, but there's a balance. Parents are given time and space to connect with their child, yet they also rely on extended family and community for support. Preparing for a child's arrival often brings people together. Observer 3024 tilted his head again, studying the couple practicing with the model baby. This emotional attachment before the offspring is even viable. It introduces a layer of expectation then. Dr. Park met his inquisitive gaze. Yes, there is an element of expectation and perhaps even hope. For many, these connections lay a foundation for the child's sense of security, shaping their development in ways that are both emotional and psychological. Humans believe this helps the child grow into a well-rounded adult. She paused, watching the window as the expectant couple shared laughter and quiet words. In some ways, it's as much a part of human culture as it is biology. We prepare not only for the arrival but for the journey of raising a child. The group fell silent for a moment, each reflecting on the complexity of human preparations. Dr. Park then led Elder Zarnak, Scholar Siskel, and Observer 3024 into an observation room. The one-way glass provided a clear view into the delivery suite below, where a mother was in the final stages of labor. Her partner stood beside her, his hands clenched tightly in hers, murmuring words of encouragement that could barely be heard over her increasingly animalistic cries. Welcome to the final act of human reproduction, Dr. Park said, her tone warm but factual. I must warn you, what you are about to witness is raw, intense, and messy.
It cannot possibly be that intense.
Ziskel muttered, his antennae twitching nervously as the mother let out a feral roar that reverberated even through the soundproof glass.
Was that the mother? Surely that is not normal.
Dr. Park gave him a patient smile. Actually, it's entirely normal. Labor is a physically demanding process, and vocalization can help manage the intensity. Humans are very expressive. The Virexian scholar shifted uneasily, while Elder Zarnak's feathers flared slightly in an instinctive response to the sound.
It is reminiscent of the Velocian stormhawks during their mating season,
Zarnak commented, his voice tinged with awe.
They, too, scream before the miracle of life begins.
Dr. Park raised an eyebrow but decided not to pursue the stormhawk analogy. Let's focus on the mother, she said, gesturing toward the scene below. The mother's face was red, her hair plastered to her forehead as she bore down with another contraction. Her partner whispered soothing words in her ear, though his expression suggested he was secretly praying to escape with all his fingers intact. The medical staff moved around them with practiced calm, adjusting monitors and offering quiet encouragement. The baby is crowning, Dr. Park said, her tone upbeat. This is one of the most challenging parts of the process. The mother let out another guttural scream, her body trembling with the effort. Ziskel's antennae drooped visibly, and he took a small step back, clicking softly in distress.
Surely this is excessive,
he said, his voice tight.
She appears to be in trouble.
No, Dr. Park replied smoothly. This is the human body working exactly as it should. Labor is intense, but it's also an incredible demonstration of endurance and strength.
Strength,
Ziskel muttered faintly, his multifaceted eyes shimmered.
Terrifying strength.
As the baby's head emerged, Ziskel froze, his posture stiffening. His antennae twitched violently, and his mandibles made a sharp, faintly squeaky sound.
By the hive! I cannot!
Before anyone could react, the Virexian scholar toppled backward, hitting the floor with a dramatic thud and an undignified hiss. Observer 3024 blinked down at him impassively. He appears to have deactivated. Elder Zarnak tilted his head, his feathers smoothing back into a neutral display.
Fascinating. Do Virexians lack the capacity for visual endurance?
I think it's more emotional endurance, Dr. Park replied dryly, crouching to check on the fainted scholar. He'll be fine. Labor can be overwhelming to witness, especially the first time. Meanwhile, the delivery room reached its climax. The father, guided by a nurse, gently supported the baby's shoulders as the rest of the body emerged. The tiny newborn slid into his hands, slick and grayish-blue, its tiny chest still. For a brief moment, the room held its breath. Then the baby gasped, letting out a wailing cry as its skin flushed pink, its lungs drawing in air for the first time. The father's face broke into an astonished grin as he handed the newborn to the mother, who was sobbing tears of relief and joy. The baby nestled against her chest, instinctively rooting for her breast. In the observation room, Elder Zarnak watched with a mix of reverence and pride.
Terrans are remarkable creatures, he said. Even in the face of such pain, they triumph.
Observer 3024 tilted his head, his voice flat but tinged with curiosity. It is a highly inefficient process, yet it results in a functional outcome. Fascinating. Ziskel groaned from the floor, slowly regaining consciousness.
What happened? Did she survive?
Dr. Park helped him sit up, a bemused smile on her face. Yes, Scholar Ziskel. Both mother and child are perfectly fine. In fact, the baby has already begun nursing. Ziskel's eyes darted back to the glass. When he saw the peaceful scene below, mother, father, and child united in a moment of quiet connection, he let out a soft, resigned sigh.
I do not understand humans.
That's part of the charm, Dr. Park said with a grin. We're full of surprises. As the medical team below worked quietly, ensuring both mother and baby were comfortable, the observation room remained filled with a contemplative silence. Dr. Park glanced at her alien guests, each processing the experience in their own unique way. Elder Zarnak was the first to speak, his voice calm but carrying out an undercurrent of awe.
The cries of the mother, the struggle, the triumph. It was magnificent. Such strength, such determination.
Dr. Park nodded appreciatively. That's one way to look at it. Humans often refer to labor as a kind of battle, one that takes all their strength and focus. Zarnak's feathers shifted into a proud display of blue and green.
It is clear to me why your kind is so formidable. To endure such an ordeal for a single life, it speaks to a deep reverence for creation.
Ziskel, who was now seated with his back against the wall, raised a trembling hand.
Forgive me if I do not leap to poetic metaphors,
he muttered.
I thought she was going to explode.
Observer 3024 blinked slowly, his eyes turning to Ziskel. Your reaction was illogical. The process proceeded as expected, despite its inefficiencies. Ziskel's antennae twitched indignantly.
It was a messy process and horrifying. The sounds, the fluids, and the screaming. I still hear it ringing in my mind.
Dr. Park suppressed a smile. Birth is messy, yes, but it's also one of the most natural things in the world. Ziskel groaned dramatically, rubbing his temples.
Natural or not, I stand by my belief that producing thousands of larvae at once is far superior. No screaming, nobody fainting.
You fainted,
Zarnak interjected smoothly, his feathers twitching in what could only be amusement.
The mother endured. You fainted.
Ziskel's mandibles clicked shut, and he crossed his arms with a huff. Observer 3024 turned to Dr. Park, his tone analytical but tinged with curiosity. The infant's shift in coloration, from blue to pink, was most intriguing. Is this a typical reaction upon first exposure to oxygen? Dr. Park nodded. Exactly. It's a sign the baby's lungs are working, and the blood is circulating properly. That first breath is a critical moment. The gray tilted his head. It is remarkable. The unpredictability of this process, the genetic variance, the physical struggle, it is inefficient. But it introduces variables that cloning cannot replicate. I find myself curious about its long-term advantages. Dr. Park smiled. Humans value those variables. It's part of what makes us who we are. Adaptable, unique, and occasionally stubborn. Ziskel muttered.
Occasionally stubborn.
Zarnak let out a deep, rumbling chuckle, a sound Dr. Park hadn't realized he could make.
Stubbornness is not a flaw, scholar. It is clearly a survival trait.
As the group left the observation room, the tension from earlier had eased, replaced by a tentative camaraderie. Elder Zarnak stopped at the hallway's end, turning to Dr. Park with a respectful bow of his head.
Today, I have seen the resilience of your kind, Doctor. It reminds me that life, no matter how it begins, is worth every effort to protect. Your people honor it well.
Dr. Park inclined her head. Thank you, Elder Zarnak. It's been an honor to share this with you. Ziskel, still visibly rattled but determined to maintain some dignity, offered a stiff nod.
Your people are strong. Terrifying but strong. I will take this lesson back to the hive.
Make sure to mention the fainting,
Zarnak added with a feathered smirk. Ziskel shot him a glare, but said nothing else, his antennae twitching in annoyance. Finally, observer 3024 paused, his unblinking eyes fixed on Dr. Park. This experience has challenged my understanding of efficiency. Perhaps unpredictability has merit. I will consider this further. Dr. Park smiled. That's all I can ask, observer. Thank you for being open to the experience. As the aliens departed, each carrying a newfound perspective, Dr. Park stood in the quiet hallway, reflecting on what had just transpired. It wasn't every day you introduced alien species to the messy, beautiful chaos of human birth, and she had to admit it was one of the most fulfilling experiences of her career. She chuckled softly, imagining Ziskel's retelling of the event to his hive mates. Something told her they wouldn't let him live it down. I hope you enjoyed that story. Click right here to watch another video with the same characters.